Overlooking the Kansas River, Sauer Castle invokes the image of a classic haunted house and is said to be one of Kansas's most haunted locations. Built by New York businessman Anton Sauer, the castle was home to his wife and 12 children, one of whom died in infancy and was buried on the property. Sauer died only a month later at the castle from tuberculosis and was buried at a nearby cemetery. His daughter's body was also moved to the cemetery to be with him. Local rumors, however, suggest the entire Sauer family was buried on the property, and that's just one of many bizarre tales attached to the home. Some have also claimed that a woman hanged herself in the castle's tower, and that the home holds buried bodies in a secret tunnel leading to the river. With a long, dark history, it's no wonder that neighbors of Sauer Castle report strange lights and voices coming from the home. But perhaps the eeriest story of all is the local legend that every Halloween, a man and woman can be seen dancing in the tower. On New York's Staten Island sits Kreischer Mansion, a stately Gothic structure built by brickworks magnate Balthasar Kreischer in the 1800s. Kreischer passed away just 1 year after the mansion was completed, and the family's factory burned to the ground shortly after. Subsequently, Kreischer's son Edward took his own life, and the company filed for bankruptcy. Decades later, in 2005, a local mob boss ordered the property's caretaker to carry out a hit at the home. The killer then disposed of the body in the basement's furnace. Local lore suggests this history of tragedy and bloodshed has left a mark on the mansion. Neighbors have reported strange lights and voices coming from the house. Edward Kreischer's wife, a cook who died in the mansion, and wailing children are all said to still haunt the now abandoned home. William J. Lemp Sr. was heir to a brewery fortune when he purchased his now historic St. Louis mansion in the 1860s. Tragedy first struck the family in 1901 when one of Lemp's sons died under mysterious circumstances. Lemp subsequently took his own life in the mansion, as did 2 of his other sons following the demise of their business due to prohibition. Lemp's daughter is also said to have taken her own life in 1920 after the business was sold for a fraction of its worth. According to some, the walls of Lemp Mansion still tell the tragic tales of the family who built it. Said to be one of the most haunted places in the U.S., the mansion now houses a restaurant and bed and breakfast, where guests have reported hearing voices, seeing glasses break and candles light themselves, and hearing a piano play by itself in the bar. The now infamous Sally House sits along the Missouri River bluffs in Atchison, KS. In the early 1900s, Dr. Charles Finney ran a medical practice out of the home and performed emergency surgery on a 6-year-old girl named Sally whose appendix had burst. The situation was supposedly so dire that Sally was not even fully sedated before surgery began. The young girl died on the table, and the tragic event has led to reports of hauntings in the ensuing years. Since about 1993, there have been numerous reports of cold spots, feelings of being touched, malfunctioning electronics, and even EVP recordings that are allegedly of Sally herself. The current owners say that they leave the radio on at night to subdue Sally's restless spirit. Built as a tuberculosis hospital in 1910, the Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, saw thousands of deaths during its years of operation. With fresh air thought to be an effective remedy, patients were often left out in the elements regardless of the season, or else placed in sunrooms where their lungs would be exposed to ultraviolet light. Other treatments included muscles and ribs being removed to allow the lungs to expand, or having balloons surgically implanted to expand the lungs by force, which often resulted in fatalities. At the height of the tuberculosis epidemic, the hospital saw an estimated 1 death per hour. As deaths increased, Waverly Hills constructed a tunnel to carry the deceased to a nearby railway, out of sight of the living. This death tunnel, along with the rest of the hospital, is said to be a hotspot for paranormal activity. Over the years, visitors have reported hearing footsteps and disembodied voices, seeing strange shadows, and even encountering a young ghost named Timmy who is said to roll a ball around on the building's upper floors. In the Los Angeles neighborhood of Los Feliz looms a hulking, Mayan-inspired building created by the legendary architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Commissioned and built in the 1920s by retired artist John Soden, the house was purchased by Dr. George Hodel in 1945. Hodel was an acclaimed physician in the field of venereal disease, and his practice catered to many of Hollywood's elite. The doctor was also rumored to host hedonistic parties and orgies in the labyrinthine home, and he was said to beat his children in the basement. In the early 2000s, Hodel's son Steve claimed that his father was the culprit behind the infamous Black Dahlia murder, the unsolved death and mutilation of Elizabeth Short, and that it took place in the basement of the John Soden house. While under investigation for Short's murder, George Hodel fled the U.S. and spent his remaining days in Asia. Subsequent residents of the Soden house have reported eerie occurrences in the home, including the sounds of chains rattling, disembodied voices, and apparitions that appear to be Mr. Hodel himself. Frank Lloyd Wright's Taliesin was built in Spring Green, Wisconsin, as a personal refuge. Having been exiled professionally from Chicago after fleeing to Europe with the wife of a client, Martha Mama Borthwick Cheney, Wright retreated to Spring Green in an effort to reestablish his practice. Tragedy struck Taliesin on August 15, 1914, when the family cook, Julian Carlton, murdered Mama, her children, and 4 others with a hatchet before pouring gasoline throughout the home and setting some of the bodies on fire. Frank Lloyd Wright was said to never be the same after the terrible event. As the site of a brutal massacre, it's no surprise that Taliesin is rumored to be haunted. Visitors have reported windows and doors opening and closing by themselves, along with a vision of Mama herself in a flowing white gown.